Here are 5 things beginners on the piano do, but shouldn't. So I've been teaching piano now for nearly 15 years, and I've seen pupils make these mistakes time and time again. So I thought I'd share them with you so you could see if you're doing them yourself, so you can correct them, and also so you can watch out for them so you know what to avoid as you're learning. So here's the first one. So in day-to-day life, when people are using their hands, they're normally just grabbing things, picking stuff up, maybe doing some typing, but you don't normally use your fingers individually, especially these fingers here, your pinky and your ring fingers. So naturally, when you first start on the piano, you're using your thumb and then these 2 fingers here, which would be first, second, third in piano, because they're stronger. So if you're playing a chord, for instance, you might want to play it like this, which is fine. But the common mistake that people do when they first start out is they curl in the 4th and 5th finger because they feel weak and it doesn't feel natural to stretch them out. So it's really important when you start playing not to curl your 4th and 5th fingers in like that, yeah? And this is the kind of thing, if you're having private lessons, then the teacher would tell you. So you need to remember to bring your 4th and 5th fingers out whilst you're playing. And also, some beginners do anything they can to try to avoid using these 4th and 5th fingers. So for instance, if they're playing the blues scale, they'll go something like this, using your 1st, 2nd and 3rd fingers, which may seem like the obvious choice because these fingers are stronger, so therefore they can play faster. But doing this, it means they'll never be able to develop the strength in the 4th and 5th fingers, and so never be able to play to their full potential. It's the equivalent of learning to drive a car, but only ever using the first 3 gears, so you'll never be able to get up to full speed. So that is the first thing to avoid, curling in your 4th and 5th fingers. The next thing I see beginners do is to do with the sustain pedal. So either they don't use it at all, so as you can hear, there's loads of gaps between the chords. Or if they do, they just keep the sustain pedal held down the whole time whilst they're playing the song. For example, so as you can hear, when you do that, it makes all the notes meld together and it just sounds messy. So here is the correct way to use the sustain pedal. So I think the best way to think about using the sustain pedal is you need to make the sound with the piano and then you need to capture it with the sustain pedal, if that makes sense. So if you take this simple chord progression, so you play the chord and then you push the sustain pedal down just after you've played it. Then you're going to hold it down until you've made the next chord sound. So you play a chord and then you reset it. So you play the chord and then you capture the sound, okay? So then you go up to the A minor, you play, keep your foot down and then you release and push it down again. Make the sound, push it down, and release it, and push it down again. So just getting that coordination of play, push, and hold until you've made the next sound. The third thing I see people doing all the time, and this is not just beginners, it's people that have been learning for years, is when they first start learning a piece, they just try to go too fast too early on, which leads to lots of stops and starts and an uneven tempo. For example, when people first start learning Fiordalisa, what they do is they start off with the first bit, this bit, really fast, and then they slow down when it comes to the next bit, which is a bit trickier. So they'll go, and then they suddenly have to slow down, and they're figuring the notes out, and then go back to that bit, and then go fast again and slow down. So it's really uneven tempo. So when you're first starting to learn a piece, just start off slower and then gradually build up the tempo. Don't be tempted to play the easier bits faster and slow down for the more difficult bits. The fourth thing I see some beginners do is this. So what they'll do is when they're playing, they'll flop their wrists down like this and sometimes even rest it on their thigh or just part of the piano like this. Yeah? So you want to avoid doing that. It's really important not to flop your wrists down like that because this is going to create tension in your hands and your wrists and potentially cause pain in the long run. And sometimes people will go the other way, so they'll have their wrists up like that. And that might be caused by the height of the seat. So you need to make sure that you're sat up straight. You don't want to be hunching over. You need your shoulders relaxed. The upper part of your arm is coming slightly away from your body and your wrist is nice and flat and in line with the back of your hand. And then your hands and fingers need to have a slight arch. And above all, you need to make sure that you're nice and relaxed. And the fifth thing that beginners don't focus on enough is fingering. Sometimes people might feel like having to remember specific fingering is just a hassle and another thing to think about whilst you're playing and figuring all the notes and the rhythms, etc. But without focusing on specific fingering for a piece that you're learning, it can actually make it a lot harder. Because if you think about it, when you start to play a piece faster and you haven't learned specific fingering, then you've suddenly got to think, oh, hang on a minute, I don't have a finger to use there. I'll have to quickly turn underneath. And so do you know what I mean? It's almost like improvising the fingering as you're playing. And therefore, won't be able to play as fluently, and you also won't develop muscle memory, which means your fingers start to remember which notes to play and where to go, which means you won't be able to play as fast. For example, let's just dive into Fiorelisa. Just say you don't choose specific fingering for the next bit, so you just play what's there. Suddenly you're like, oh, okay, you've got to twist underneath. And then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, you've got to go all the way down. Just becomes a mess and you slow down and you're suddenly thinking, oh, which fingers am I going to use? So make sure you practice your pieces with specific fingering, and if you're not having private tuition and you're teaching yourself online, what you can do is you can get a pencil and you can write the fingering above the notes on your piece of music, just as a reminder, which is what a private tutor would do in real life. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting and that it helps you to avoid some of these common mistakes that beginners make. If you did like this video, you may be interested in this one of mine. If you want to see more stuff like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've been Arthur from Birds Piano Academy, and thanks for watching.